I left home as the family disappointment. Years later, they called me back like I was their only hope. What they didn't know, I was coming back, but not to save them the way they expected. The crisp autumn air drifted through the city like a quiet whisper. Cool, steady, carrying with it the faint scent of fallen leaves and something else, something harder to name. Change. High above the streets, behind a wall of glass and steel, Jason Thornton stood motionless at his office window. Below him, the city moved with relentless purpose. Cars flowed like rivers of light. People hurried along sidewalks, their lives unfolding in a rhythm he knew all too well. It was a world he had fought to become part of, a world he had earned. His reflection stared back at him in the glass. Older now, sharper around the edges. Success had a way of doing that, refining you, hardening you, teaching you what it cost to win. The boy who had left a small, forgotten town years ago, with nothing but a suitcase and a quiet storm inside him, was gone. In his place stood a man people respected, a man people listened to, a man who had built everything on his own. And yet, as he looked into his own eyes, there was something there that success had never touched. Something unsettled, something unfinished. The soft buzz of the intercom cut through the silence. "Mr. Thornton, there's a letter for you." His assistant's voice was polite, controlled, but distant, like everything else in this world. Jason blinked, pulled back from his thoughts. "A letter?" he repeated, almost to himself. "Marked personal. No one sent letters anymore. Not to his office." He turned slowly from the window, each step measured as he crossed the polished floor to his desk. The envelope sat there waiting for him. Simple, unremarkable. But the moment his eyes landed on the handwriting, everything inside him tightened. He knew it instantly. Even after all these years, his mother. For a long moment, he didn't move, didn't touch it, didn't breathe, because in that small, fragile envelope was a past he had spent years trying to bury. His fingers finally reached for it, careful, almost reluctant. The paper felt thinner than he expected, lighter, as if whatever was inside didn't weigh much at all. But he knew better. He turned it over in his hands once, twice, then let out a slow breath and tore it open. The sound of paper splitting seemed louder than it should have, sharper, like something breaking. He unfolded the letter. His eyes scanned the first line, then slowed. "Dear Jason." The handwriting was uneven, shakier than he remembered. Each word pressed into the paper like it had taken effort to write. "Your father and I aren't well." Jason's jaw tightened. "Your brother and sister have been struggling too." A faint, humorless smile flickered across his lips. "Of course they were. We could all use your help." There it was, the real reason. He kept reading, slower now, every word landing heavier than the last. "We know things weren't easy when you were younger, and we weren't always fair to you. Not always fair." Jason let out a quiet breath through his nose. Not quite a laugh, not quite anger, something in between. "But we need you now. Please come home." The final line lingered. "Love, Mom." He lowered the letter slightly, but didn't look away, didn't move. Then he read it again, and again, as if the meaning might change, as if the past might somehow rewrite itself between the lines. But it didn't. After all these years, they needed him. The same family who had dismissed him, overlooked him, reduced him to something small, something insignificant. Now they were asking for help. His first instinct came fast, sharp, clean. Crumple the letter. Throw it away. Forget it ever came. But his hand didn't move, because something else had surfaced. Something quieter, more dangerous. Curiosity. And beneath that, anger. Not loud, not explosive, but old, deep, unfinished. He hadn't spoken to them in years. Not since the day his father had stood in that doorway, voice cold, final, calling him a disgrace. All because he refused to stay. Refused to inherit a failing business that had been sinking long before he was old enough to understand it. And his siblings? They hadn't defended him, hadn't questioned it. Jessica had laughed. Mark had shrugged. That was enough. So he left. No long goodbye. No second chances. Just a suitcase. And a promise to himself. Never to come back. And yet, here he was, holding a letter that had crossed every boundary he'd built, calling him home. Jason exhaled slowly, folding the paper with deliberate care. Not out of respect, but control. The rest of the day passed in fragments. Meetings blurred together. Voices faded in and out. Numbers, projections, conversations. None of it stayed, because his mind wasn't there. It was somewhere else. Somewhere smaller. Quieter. Back in a house filled with tension. Back at a table where silence spoke louder than words. Back in moments he had worked too hard to forget. His father's voice. Sharp. Unyielding. His mother's silence. Worse than anything she could have said. The laughter. The dismissal. The constant reminder that he didn't belong. He had built his success on that feeling. Fed it. Used it. Turned it into something powerful. And it had worked. He had won. So why? Did this letter feel like it still had power over him? That night, his apartment was quiet. Too quiet. The city lights stretched beyond the windows, glowing softly against the dark. Jason stood at the counter, pouring himself a glass of scotch. The amber liquid caught the light as it settled. Still controlled. Unlike him. He took a slow sip. Let it burn just enough. And then, his phone buzzed. He glanced down Alex. The one person who had seen everything. The only person who never asked him to explain. You okay? Jason stared at the message longer than he needed to. Then typed back. Got a letter. From my parents. Then, they want me to come home. The reply came almost instantly. Then go. Jason frowned slightly. Typed again. Not sure that's a good idea. This time, the response took a few seconds longer. It's not about good or bad. It's about peace. You won't get it if you keep running. Jason's thumb hovered over the screen. But he didn't reply. Because the truth didn't need a response. It just sat there, unavoidable. Later that night, long after the city had quieted, Jason sat alone, the letter resting on the table beside him. He looked at it one last time, then made his decision. The next morning, he booked the flight. No hesitation this time. No second guessing. Because whether he liked it or not, this wasn't over. Not yet. As he closed his laptop, one thought settled firmly in his mind. Steady, unshakable. The black sheep was going back. But this time, he wasn't the boy they had broken. He was the man they would have to face. And one way or another, everything was about to change. The town appeared gradually, almost reluctantly, as if it had been waiting for him. Jason drove past the old welcome sign, its paint chipped and faded, the letters barely holding on after years of neglect. Nothing about it had changed. And somehow, that made everything feel heavier. The streets stretched out ahead of him, quiet and familiar, too familiar. The diner still stood on the corner of Main Street, its neon sign flickering weakly against the fading light of dusk. It buzzed faintly, uneven, like it always had. He remembered sitting there as a teenager, staring out the window, wondering what life looked like beyond this place, wondering if he would ever escape it. He drove a little slower, past the hardware store where he had worked long summer days, stacking shelves, wiping dust from tools he never cared about. Back then, every hour felt like a sentence. Every day felt like a life he didn't choose. And now, here he was again. But something was different. The town didn't feel like home. It felt like a memory, a place frozen in time, while he had moved on without it. Jason tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Then finally, he turned onto the street he knew better than any other. The house came into view slowly, still there, still standing. But time had not been kind. The once painted exterior had dulled into something tired and worn. The porch sagged slightly under its own weight, and the bushes that used to be trimmed neatly along the walkway had grown wild, creeping toward the steps like they had been left alone too long. It looked smaller, much smaller than he remembered. Jason pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. Silence filled the car instantly. For a moment, he didn't move. His hands rested on the steering wheel. His eyes fixed on the house. This was it. The place where everything started. The place he had spent years trying to forget. And now, he was back. He exhaled slowly, steadying himself. Because whatever waited inside that house wasn't going to be easy. Grabbing his bag, Jason stepped out of the car. The cool air hit him immediately, carrying that same autumn chill from the city. But here, it felt different, sharper, quieter. Each step toward the front door felt heavier than the last. The wooden steps creaked beneath his weight. A sound he hadn't heard in years. A sound he hadn't missed. He stood at the door for a moment, just looking at it. Then finally, he raised his hand and pressed the doorbell. The chime echoed faintly inside. Footsteps followed, slow, uneven. And then, the door opened. His mother stood there. For a second, Jason didn't recognize her. Time had changed her more than he expected. Her hair, once full of color and life, had faded into gray. Her face, lined and worn, carried the weight of years that hadn't been kind. She looked smaller, frail, like life had taken more from her than it had given. "Jason," she whispered. Her voice trembled, barely holding together. "You came." Jason held her gaze, his expression unreadable. "I did," he said calmly. "You asked me to." For a brief moment, something flickered across her face, relief, guilt. Maybe both. She stepped aside quickly. "Come in." Jason walked past her without hesitation. The house smelled the same. A mix of old wood, dust, and something faintly stale. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything felt different. He stepped into the living room. And there sat his father. In the same chair. But not the same man. A blanket covered his legs. His posture was slouched, his movements slower, heavier. The man who once commanded every room he entered now looked like he barely had the strength to sit upright. But his eyes were still sharp, still watching, still measuring. They locked onto Jason. Neither of them spoke at first. The silence stretched, thick, uncomfortable. "Dad," Jason said finally. Not warmly, not coldly, just acknowledging. "Jason," his father replied. A simple grunt, flat. No welcome, no apology. Just recognition. Jason nodded slightly. That was enough. Because he hadn't come back for affection. "Where's Mark?" "Jessica?" he asked, breaking the silence. His mother hesitated. "They're out. They'll be back soon. They wanted to be here." Jason glanced at her briefly. He could hear it in her voice. Something she wasn't saying. But he didn't push. Not yet. Instead, he sat down on the couch. The fabric felt rough beneath his hands, worn, familiar. He leaned back slightly, his eyes moving around the room. The same walls. The same furniture. The same space where he had spent years feeling invisible. And suddenly, the memories came back. Not all at once, but enough. His father's voice, sharp, critical. His mother's silence, always choosing peace over truth. The laughter, the looks, the constant reminder that he wasn't enough. And now, they needed him. His father cleared his throat. "You've done well for yourself." The words landed slowly, heavy. Jason looked at him. "I have. And I did it without any help." Silence again. Something flickered in his father's eyes. Gone too quickly to name. "We heard," his father said. "About your business." Jason leaned forward slightly. "It's more than a business." His voice sharpened just enough. "It's everything I built." His mother quickly stepped in. "We're proud of you, Jason. We always knew." He let out a quiet breath. Not quite a laugh. "Did you?" he asked. That stopped her. Her expression faltered, her eyes dropping as if the answer sat somewhere she didn't want to look. "We didn't understand," she said softly. "We didn't know how to support you." Jason held her gaze now. "And now you do?" The question hung there, unanswered. His father shifted in his chair, wincing slightly. "We made mistakes," he said, his voice rougher now. "We know that. But we need you." There it was again. Not "we miss you." Not "we're sorry." "We need you." Jason felt something rise in his chest. Old. Familiar. "And what about what I needed?" he asked quietly. The room stilled. "When I was younger, all I wanted was your support." His voice didn't rise, but it cut deeper. "I wanted you to believe in me." A pause. "But all I got was being told I wasn't enough." No one spoke. His father's jaw tightened. "Because we're family," he said finally, his tone firm again. "And family doesn't turn its back." Jason met his eyes. Unflinchy. Family doesn't make you feel like you don't belong." That landed harder than anything else. His mother reached out slowly, her hand trembling as it rested lightly on his arm. "Jason, please." Her voice broke. "We're sorry." And for a moment, just a moment, he believed she meant it. But belief wasn't the same as healing. Before he could respond, the front door opened. Voices, footsteps. Mark and Jessica walked in. They stopped the moment they saw him. Time seemed to free. Mark looked worn down. His clothes wrinkled, his expression tired. Like life had been heavier than he expected. Jessica stood straighter, more composed. But there was something beneath it. Something strained. Desperate. "Jason," Mark said, forcing a smile. "Good to see you." Jason didn't return it. "Is it?" he asked quietly. "Or do you just need something?" Mark's smile faded instantly. Jessica stepped forward. Jason, we all need help sometimes. Her voice softened. You're our brother. A pause. Can't we just start over? Jason looked at them. Really looked. These weren't the same people he left behind. But they weren't entirely different either. And that was the problem. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. I don't know if we can start over. Honest. Unfiltered. Then, after a long pause, but I'm here. The words settled into the room. And for the first time, something shifted. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But possibility. A fragile, uncertain beginning. And as silence filled the space between them, Jason realized something. This wasn't going to be simple. This wasn't going to be quick. But one way or another, everything that had been buried in this house was about to come to the surface. The room hadn't changed. Not really. Jason stood just inside the doorway, his hands still resting lightly on the frame as his eyes moved slowly across the space. What used to be his room was now something else. A guest room. Temporary. Stripped of identity. The same wallpaper clung to the walls, faded now, the pattern duller than he remembered. Time had worn it down, but not enough to erase it. Nothing here was new. Just quieter. He stepped inside. The floor creaked faintly beneath his weight, the sound echoing softly in the stillness. Even that felt familiar. Too familiar. His bag dropped gently beside the bed. He sat down slowly. The mattress dipped beneath him with a tired groan, springs protesting like they remembered him too. For a moment, he just sat there, hands resting on his knees, eyes unfocused. It felt like stepping backward into a life he had already escaped. A life he had fought too hard to outgrow. The silence in the room wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, dense. The kind of silence that waits. Because something was coming. Jason leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose. He didn't need anyone to tell him. This wasn't the hard part. The hard part was still waiting downstairs. Dinner. He knew exactly what it would be. Not a reunion. Not warmth. A conversation that had been delayed for years. And now, there was nowhere left to hide from it. By the time he made his way downstairs, the house had shifted. Not physically, but emotionally. The table was already set. Plates arranged neatly. Utensils aligned with quiet precision. His mother moved between the kitchen and dining room, placing dishes carefully, deliberately, like she was trying to hold something together that was already falling apart. The smell hit him first. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. The same meal, the same routine. Once it had been comfort. Now it felt like memory. Jason took his seat. No one said much. Mark and Jessica sat across from him, their movements slower than usual, their eyes avoiding his. His father sat at the head of the table, still, watching. The meal began quietly. Too quietly. Forks scraped against plates. Glasses shifted slightly. Small, meaningless comments surfaced. Then disappeared just as quickly. How was the flight? Fine. You've been busy? Yeah. Nothing real. Nothing honest. Just noise to fill the silence. Jason barely tasted the food. Each bite felt mechanical. Automatic. Because his attention wasn't on the plate. It was on the tension building in the room. It was inevitable. And then, finally, his father cleared his throat. The sound cut through everything. We need to talk. There it was. Jason leaned back slightly in his chair, folding his arms loosely across his chest. About what? He asked. But he already knew. His father didn't hesitate this time. About the business. And the future of this family. Jason's gaze didn't shift. Didn't soften. His mother spoke next, her voice quieter, more fragile. We know we've made mistakes, Jason. Her hands tightened slightly in her lap. But we need your help now. Need, that word again. Mark glanced at Jessica briefly before speaking. We've all messed up, he said, his voice uncertain. But this is our chance to fix things. He swallowed. Together. Jason felt something rise in his chest, sharp, bitter. He almost laughed. Fix things, he repeated slowly. His eyes moved between them. One conversation, and everything just gets fixed? No one answered. After all these years, he continued, his voice calm but edged with something deeper. You think I'd just come running? Jessica finally looked at him. Really looked. Because we're family, she said softly. And because we don't have anyone else. That landed, not loudly, but heavily. Jason felt it settle somewhere deep inside him. Somewhere he didn't like to go. Because the truth was, he had always wanted that, to belong, to matter. to be part of something that didn't feel conditional. But that version of him had been buried a long time ago. Years of rejection had built something in its place. Something stronger, but colder, a wall. And now, they were asking him to tear it down. His father spoke again, his voice rougher now, less certain. I know we were hard on you. Too hard. Jason's eyes lifted slightly. But we need you now. There it was again. Not we were wrong. Not we hurt you. Just we need you. Jason stared at him. And for a brief moment, something unexpected surfaced, pity. Because the man sitting across from him was not the same man who had once filled this house with authority. That man had been unshakable, certain, unyielding. This one was tired. I can't just forget everything, Jason said finally. You can't just pretend none of it happened. His mother reached across the table, placing her hand gently over his. The contact was soft. Careful. We're not asking you to forget, she said. Her voice trembled slightly. We're asking you to help us move forward. To be a family again. Jason looked down at her hand. It felt unfamiliar. Not wrong. Just strange. Because this was the same hand that had stayed still. When he needed it most. Mark leaned forward slightly. We've changed, Jason, he said. We know we were wrong. His voice steadied. But we want to fix it. Jason rubbed his temples slowly, the weight of everything pressing down on him. Because this was the part no one talks about. It's easy to walk away. But going back means facing everything you tried to forget. And deciding if it still has power over you. I built a life without this, he said quietly. Without looking up. A life where I didn't have to prove anything to anyone. He finally lifted his gaze. And now I'm supposed to come back and fix all of this? No one answered. Because there wasn't an easy answer. His father shifted again, slower this time. More deliberate. Jason. His voice was different now, lower, almost human. I wasn't the father you needed. That alone was enough to change the air in the room. But I'm asking you, he continued. Not as your father. A pause. As a man. Jason held his gaze. Unmoving. Help us, his father said quietly. Help me. And for the first time in his life, there was no pride in his father's voice. Just honesty. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he added. Just give us a chance to make it right. Jason felt something shift inside him. Not fully. Not completely. But enough. Because this was new. His father wasn't looking at him like a disappointment. He was looking at him like an equal. And somehow, that was harder to face than anything else. Jason pushed his chair back slowly and stood. I need time, he said. I can't decide this right now. His mother nodded quickly. Of course, take all the time you need. But he was already walking away. Because he couldn't stay in that room any longer. Not with everything still hanging in the air. He moved through the house quickly, the walls feeling closer than before. And then, he stepped outside. The night air hit him immediately. Cool. Still. The sky stretched endlessly above him, scattered with stars that felt impossibly distant. Jason stepped onto the porch and stopped. For a moment, he just stood there, breathing. Because inside, everything was complicated. But out here, it was quiet, simple. He looked out at the street, at the town he once called home, and felt it again. That pull. Not strong enough to drag him back, but strong enough to make him hesitate. Because the past doesn't disappear. It waits. And now, it was asking him something. Not for revenge. Not for anger. But for a choice. Could he go back? Could he forgive? Or was the damage already done? Jason exhaled slowly, his breath fading into the cold night air. Because whatever he decided, this time, there would be no walking away from it. Only forward. And whatever came next would define everything that followed. Sleep didn't come easy. Jason lay on his back, staring at the ceiling he used to know by heart. Every crack, every faint shadow, every mark that time had failed to erase. The room felt smaller at night. Closer, like the walls were leaning and waiting. He turned onto his side, then onto his back again. Restless. Because the past doesn't stay quiet in the dark. It speaks. And that night, it spoke clearly. He remembered being 12, standing in this very room, holding up a report card. Not perfect, but good. Good enough for any normal family. But not his. His father had barely glanced at it before saying, "Second place means someone else worked harder than you." No praise. No acknowledgement. Just disappointment. Jason closed his eyes tightly. But the memory didn't fade. It shifted. Now he was 16. At the dinner table. Trying, just once, to be heard. I don't want to stay here, he had said. I want something different. I want to study business. Jessica had laughed under her breath. Mark didn't even look up from his plate. And his father? His father had set his fork down slowly, deliberately, and looked at him like he had said something ridiculous. You're not built for that, he said flatly. This family already has a future. And it's right here. Jason remembered the silence that followed. Not one person defended him. Not even his mother. Especially not his mother. She had just sat there. Quiet. Like always. That silence had said more than any words ever could. Jason exhaled slowly, his chest tightening. Because that was the moment something inside him had changed. Not broken. Hardened. And the day he left. That memory came last. He could still see it clearly. The front door. His bag by his side. His heart pounding louder than anything he had ever felt. I'm leaving, he had said. His father didn't stop him. Didn't argue. Didn't care. Then don't come back asking for help, he replied coldly. Mark shrugged. Jessica rolled her eyes. And his mother? She stood there. Hands clasped. Eyes lowered. Silent. That was the moment Jason understood something he would never forget. He wasn't leaving a home. He was escaping one. Morning came slowly. Heavy. The house was quiet again. But not peaceful. The kind of quiet that lingers after something has already broken. Jason made his way downstairs, each step measured, his thoughts still tangled in everything the night had dragged back to the surface. In the kitchen, his mother stood by the table, placing plates one by one. Careful. Deliberate. She looked up when she heard him. A small, uncertain smile forming. Good morning, Jason. Her voice was soft. Almost cautious. Did you sleep well? Jason paused for a moment, then shook his head slightly. Not really. There was no point pretending. There's a lot on my mind. Her smile faded, but she nodded. I understand. A pause. We're just glad you're here. Jason didn't respond. Instead, he reached for the newspaper on the table. The headlines were exactly what he expected. Businesses closing. Layoffs increasing. Local economy struggling to stay afloat. It wasn't just his family. It was everything around them. And suddenly, this wasn't just personal anymore. It was survival. The slow, steady tap of a cane broke the silence. Jason looked up. His father entered the room. Slower than before. More careful. But his eyes. Still sharp. Still calculating. Jason, he said. His voice rough. But controlled. We need to talk. A pause. About the business. Jason folded the newspaper neatly and set it aside. All right, he said. What about it? His father lowered himself into the chair at the head of the table. The movement stiff. Deliberate. I've been going through the numbers, he said. And it's worse than I thought. Jason said nothing. Just listened. We've cut costs. Reduced inventory. Delayed payments. A pause. But it's not enough. His father looked up at him now. Really looked. If we don't get capital soon. A breath. We lose everything. The words didn't echo. They settled. Heavy. Jason held his gaze. Because for the first time, his father wasn't speaking from pride. He was speaking from fear. Have you considered selling assets? Jason asked calmly. It might give you time. His father shook his head almost immediately. It's not that simple. They're tied up. Long term. If we sell now, we take a loss we can't recover from. Jason leaned back slightly. He already knew where this was going. And then, it came. We need your help. The words hung there. You've built something successful, his father continued. Something we couldn't have imagined. A pause. If you could lend us the money. Jason felt it instantly. That old anger. Not loud. Not explosive. But deep. Because after everything. After all those years of being dismissed. Overlooked. Undervalued. Now they wanted what he had built. I'm not writing you a check, Jason said quietly. The room stilled. If I help things change. His father's expression shifted. Slightly. You don't get to run this the same way, Jason because that's what got you here. The old fire flickered in his father's eyes. This is my business, he said firmly. I built it from nothing. Jason didn't look away. And now it's falling apart. Silence, not loud. Not explosive. But final. If you want my help, Jason said, you have to let go of control. That landed harder than anything else. Because control was everything his father had ever been. For a moment, it looked like he might argue, like the old version of him might push back. But instead, his shoulders dropped, and something in him gave way. You're right. The words came out quieter than expected. I've made a mess of things. A breath. And now we're all paying for it. Jason watched him carefully. Because this was something he had never seen before. His father admitting he was wrong. All right, he said finally. We'll do it your way. Jason nodded slowly. This was what he had wanted, for years. Recognition, respect. And yet, it didn't feel the way he thought it would. It felt heavy. Because it had come too late. The kitchen door creaked open. Mark and Jessica stepped inside. They paused when they saw the tension in the room. What's going on? Mark asked. Jason didn't hesitate. We're saving the business. A beat. But things are changing. Jessica frowned slightly. What do you mean? Jason glanced briefly at his father. Then back at them. I'm taking over. The words landed like a shockwave. Dad's stepping back, he continued. And I'm running things from here on out. Mark blinked. Jessica stiffened. You can't just, she started. Yes, Jason cut in calmly. I can. No anger. No raised voice. Just certainty. Because this is the only way this survives. Silence filled the room. If you want this business, he added. If you want anything left of it. A pause. You're going to have to trust me. That word, trust, felt almost ironic. But no one said it. Mark spoke first. His voice quieter now. I'll help, he said. Whatever you need. Jessica hesitated longer. But eventually, she nodded. We're in this together. Jason studied them. Carefully. For the first time, they weren't looking down on him. They were looking to him. And that changed everything. All right, Jason said. Then we start now. The conversation shifted after that. Numbers. Plans. Steps forward. But beneath it all, something deeper was happening. Something fragile. Something new. Because for the first time in his life, Jason wasn't the outsider. He wasn't the one trying to prove himself. He was the one leading. And as the hours passed, and the conversation stretched late into the night, Jason felt something he hadn't expected. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something close. Hope. Because maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of something. Maybe. It was the beginning. And for the first time in a long time, Jason wasn't running from the past. He was standing in it, and choosing what came next. The office was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that pressed in on you, wrapping around your thoughts until they became louder than anything else in the room. Jason sat back in his leather chair, one hand pressed against his temple, eyes closed for just a moment longer than usual, trying to steady himself before the next wave hit. It didn't take long. The voices on the other end of the call were already rising again. Frustration, accusation, entitlement, all of it bleeding through the speaker like a storm he couldn't shut out. You haven't helped us at all. Jessica's voice came first, sharp, cutting, laced with emotion that felt less like pain and more like blame. All you've done is make things harder. You sent people here to tell us what we're doing wrong, gave us a list of changes, deadlines. Jason, it's like you're punishing us. Jason opened his eyes slowly, staring at the skyline beyond his office window. Steel and glass. Order. Control. A world he had built with precision, far from chaos like this. That's not what I'm doing, he said, his voice calm, but controlled in a way that meant it wouldn't stay that way for long. I'm trying to save the business. The plan my team put together is solid, but it only works if everyone actually follows it. A scoff came through the line, Mark. What we need isn't a plan, Mark said, his tone dismissive, almost irritated. We need money. That's it. You've got it, Jason. So just fix it. Jason leaned forward slightly, his jaw tightening. Fix it. As if everything, years of bad decisions, mismanagement, denial, could be erased with a transfer of funds. I've already put money into stabilizing things, Jason replied, slower now, more deliberate. But throwing more money at this isn't going to fix the real problem. And what is the real problem, Jason? Jessica snapped. There it was. The question they didn't actually want answered. Jason exhaled through his nose, his patience thinning. The real problem, he said, voice lower now, is that none of you are willing to change. Silence. Not acceptance, not reflection. Just stunned resistance. His mother's voice broke through next, fragile, trembling. Jason, it's all too much, she said softly. Your father is tired. I'm tired. We don't understand all these new systems, these changes. We just need some relief. Can't you just make it easier? For a moment, Jason said nothing. Because part of him, some old, deeply buried part, still reacted to that voice. Still wanted to fix things. Still wanted to be the one who made everything okay. But that part of him had cost him too much already. Before he could respond, his father's voice cut in. Stronger, firmer. Still clinging to authority that no longer matched reality. When is this going to be done, Jason? He asked. Once we're stable again, I've been thinking about expansion. There are a few ideas I want to explore. Jason's eyes closed again, expantio. They were drowning, and his father was talking about building a bigger ship. Dad, Jason interrupted, his voice tight now. This isn't about expansion. Then more firmly. This is about survival. The word hung in the air. Heavy. Unavoidable. You're not in a position to grow, Jason continued. You're in a position where everything could collapse if we don't fix what's broken. And fixing it means doing things differently. It means listening. It means changing how you think. Another silence followed. Longer this time. Thicker. Jason could almost picture them, standing in that same worn living room, exchanging looks, waiting for someone else to push back first. And then, Jason, his father said slowly, his tone hardening, this family has always figured things out. We don't need outsiders coming in here, telling us how to run our business. There it was, the wall. Still standing. You should be here, his father continued. Not hiding behind a team. If you're going to help, then be here and fix it yourself. Something in Jason finally snapped. Not loudly. Not explosively. But decisively. I am fixing it, he said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. But I'm not going to do it alone. No one spoke. This didn't happen overnight, he continued. And it's not going to be solved overnight. You don't get to ignore the process and just expect results. His mother began to cry softly in the background. Jessica started speaking again, faster now, more emotional. Mark muttered something under his breath. But Jason was already done. I've made my position clear, he said, his tone final. The help is there. The plan is there. The support is there. A pause. Then, but if you're not willing to do the work, there's nothing more I can do. And with that, he ended the call. The silence that followed was deafening. Jason leaned back in his chair slowly, his chest rising and falling heavier than before. The city outside hadn't changed. Cars still moved. People still rushed. Life continued. But inside that office, everything felt still. Heavy. Final. He dragged a hand down his face, exhaling deeply. For a moment, he let himself feel it. The frustration. The disappointment. The quiet, familiar ache of realizing that some people never change. His mind drifted, uninvited, back to the night he had left. A suitcase by the door. His father's voice cold and final. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. And Jason had walked anyway. Not because he wasn't afraid, but because staying had cost him more than leaving ever could. And now, years later, he was right back in it, trying to fix something that had been broken long before he ever had a chance to understand it. Jason stared out at the skyline again, his reflection faint in the glass. He wasn't that person anymore. He had built something real, something strong, something his family still didn't understand. And maybe they never would. He straightened slightly, the weight in his chest shifting. Not disappearing, but settling into something clearer. A decision. He reached for his phone and dialed. His assistant answered almost immediately. I need you to send another team out, Jason said. Senior level this time. And make sure expectations are clear, non-negotiable. Yes, Mr. Thornton. And one more thing, he added after a brief pause. If they don't cooperate, we start preparing an exit. There was a beat of silence. Understood. Jason ended the call and set the phone down carefully. Not angrily. Not hesitantly. Just deliberately. For the first time since the letter arrived, I finally understood something. I was never the problem. I was just the one who refused to stay small. I would help, but I wouldn't sacrifice myself. Not again. I was setting the terms. Standing in my office again, looking out over everything I built. I realized something. Going back didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the past. But it did something more important. It reminded me who I became without them, and who I would never be again. Because the black sheep was never lost. He was just the only one brave enough to leave. If this story hit you, if you've ever felt like the outsider, like the one no one believed in, then this one was for you. Drop a comment below. Would you have gone back or stayed away? Don't forget to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. And subscribe for more powerful, emotional stories just like this. Because sometimes, the stories that hurt the most are the ones we need to hear.